Ini bener yang kemarin taman kirim Mas.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom,
Om Swastiastu,
Namo Buddhaya,
salam kebajikan, Rahayu, Rahayu, Rahayu. The Honorable, the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Airlangga, Mr. Syahrul Marta Dwi Susilo, SSMA PhD.
The respected 5 Deans of Faculty of Humanities Universitas Airlangga, Profesor Dr. Sarkawi SSM Hum, Dr. Listiono Santoso SSM Hum, Dewi Meirasyawati SSMA M Hum PhD.
The speakers, Associate Professor Free Columbine from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, Arum Budiastuti SSMCH PhD from Universitas Airlangga.
The invited guests, Faculty of Humanities lecturers, the committees, and our beloved students.
First of all, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Rakanda Rasdan Prabaswara.
And I am Nazwa Rahma Hanum Prasetya. We are student ambassador of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Airlangga and are going to be the master of ceremony for today's event.
We are gladly welcome all of you here in Majapahit Room, ASEC Tower within the international seminar, Reimagining Global Futures, Power, Culture, and Morality in a Changing World.
This event is part of a series of events to commemorate the 27th anniversary of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Airlangga on December 2nd, 2025.
In connection with the start of the international seminar today, we invite all the audiences to please stand up because we are going to take documentation together.
Once again, to all of the participants, please stand up. And for all of you who in the right and also in the left, please, you can closer to the center of the stage. Thank you.
To the documentation team, you can give the instructions. Time is yours. Thank you. You all may sit. Ladies and gentlemen, now the main agenda is going to begin.
The second session of today's event is the international seminar that will be led by one of the greatest lecturer we have in here.
Please welcome Lina Puryanti, SSM Hum PhD.
And for our first speaker, today, Associate Professor Frick Columbine, who are already joining us through the Zoom.
And our second speaker, Arum Budiastuti, SSMCH PhD. For Mem Lina and Mem Arum, time is yours.
Oke, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished speakers, Pak Frick, and then also Mbak Arum, and then colleague here, Prof, from India, and then also all the participants, students, okay, everyone. Yeah, okay. So welcome to our session on reimagining global futures, power, culture, and morality in a changing world. It is truly a privilege to moderate this dialogue, which invite us to think beyond the familiar narratives of globalizations and to imagine new ways of understanding our interconnected world. When we speak about global futures, we often focus on shifting power, on geopolitical, economic, or technological. But today's theme is very lively, timely, because it asks us to go further, to see globalization not only as a system of power, but also as a moral and cultural process, one that shapes how societies imagine what is legitimate, valuable, and also just. To discuss these challenging narratives of the global future, we are very fortunate that we have had two speakers with us. Prof. Frick Columbine from Frey University. Hello, Pak Frick. Very cool there in Leiden.
Selamat siang, Bu Lina. Very
Selamat
cold.
siang, Pak.
It's still
Okay.
a bit dark.
Oh, bisa
Sun is
lebih.
rising.
Oh, selamat pagi, Pak.
Masih pagi.
6 hours time difference, yeah. And also Dr. Arum Budiastuti from the Faculty of Humanities. Well, before we are going into the discussions, I would like to use this time as a moment of shared happiness. Congratulations from all of us, because tomorrow, Pak Frick will be officially inaugurated as a full professor in Frey University. Please give a big applause. Our really good friends from long time ago. So for us, Pak Frick has been professor already. Okay. And also, this occasion is also very momentous because this is, for me, it's a welcoming home and congratulations for Dr. Arum Budiastuti after she successfully finished her PhD from Sydney University. So please give Dr. Arum big applause. Okay, kind of a celebration. Okay, so our today's speakers bring complementary perspective of this transformation. Pak Frick will discuss about globalization and exploring new concepts, while Mbak Arum will discuss about halalization and the making of the global halal market. I think Prof Frick, Pak Frick, yeah, we'll begin by taking us back to the foundation by asking how we might rethink or even reimagine the very concept of globalization itself. His reflections challenge us to move beyond conventional categories and explore new conceptual languages that better capture the complexity of our global interdependence. And then following that, Mbak Arum will turn our attention to a more specific but equally powerful example. That's the global halal market. So through the process of what she calls halalizations, it's a very interesting term, we see how religious ethics and cultural practices are shaping global economies, redefining what globalization means from a moral and cultural standpoint. And together, these two talks remind us that globalization is no longer a one-way flow of Western ideas and capital. It is increasingly multi-centered, culturally plural, and morally contested. And reimagining our global future requires us to think not only about who holds power, but also whose values and visions define the global order to come. So with that, let us begin. And due to Pak Frick only has a limited time to stay until the end of the sessions, so I please Prof. Frick to deliver his thoughts that will be directly followed by questions and responses from the audiences. Okay, Pak Frick, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Bu Devi, Bu Lina, to invite me for this international conference. I really appreciate the occasion. It's also kind of strange to address you this way. Since COVID-19, we have discovered the possibility of online meetings, but it's far from perfect. And I much prefer to be in Surabaya and be able to meet you face to face. The more so because I see these very nice chairs on stage on your side, and I have a very uncomfortable chair on my side. But still, we can do it online, and I try to reach out to you. And then I want to express a happy birthday. So I understand it's your anniversary of the faculty. That's a great thing. And then, so my screen, I can see how I come across on your side. And I see my head. It must be a giant head in your room, a bit scary perhaps. And that reminds me that in 1990, so this is a long time ago, many of you were not even born. I had a very small role. I played a small role in a movie of Dono Casino in Indro. And when I arrived in Indonesia, it was a full year in Padang, Sumatra Barat. At the very beginning, this film was made, and later it appeared during the year. So I went to the cinema, and then had the strange experience of sitting in the cinema, and seeing my head as big as you can see it now, just before my eyes. And then the last introductory remark. So the title of the topic of my presentation will not be about globalization, but about global citizenship. And thank you for mentioning that as of tomorrow I will be a full professor, Bu Lina. But it's not only a rank, but it also comes with an exact description of the chair that you're holding. And the name of the chair is Global Citizenship Education from an Anthropological Perspective. I will give an inaugural lecture, perhaps in May. The exact date still has to be decided. But this is, in a way, a tryout. This is the first time that I will speak about this topic. So you are the first to hear me talk about this topic. And I hope my voice is clear on your side, and if not, then I try to fix something. My presentation consists of 3 parts. It will take about 30 minutes, but if you think it takes too long, just let me know and I can cut it short. I will first discuss the concept of global citizenship and how difficult it is to believe in global citizenship in our current world. And second, I will speak about global citizenship education, how to teach students at universities about global citizenship, or taking the perspective of the students, how to learn about global citizenship. And if time allows, I would like to say a few words about how to teach global citizenship, making use of insights of anthropology. And I must warn you that the first half of the presentation is really very, very depressing, but I will try to end on a more optimistic note. So the first key concept is global citizenship. At its core, global citizenship means simply that we are strongly aware of the fact that we belong to a global community, that the globe is one large but ultimately limited space, and that somehow we have to live together in this space and on this planet. Following Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen, all humans have an equal right to develop the full potential as human beings. Amartya Sen, in his seminal book Development as Freedom, argues that development means freedom from one's constraints, to become a full human being, to develop all our potential as human being, to play, to think, to create things, and to do great things in this world. And according to Sen, economic growth, or GNP, or individual incomes can be important as means to expanding the freedoms enjoyed by members of society, but freedom is more than just income, or development is more than income. So there are other determinants as social and economic arrangements, facilities for education, facilities for health, as well as political and civil rights. So the liberty of people to participate in public discussions, as we're doing in this meeting. Global citizenship, however, does not come only with rights, but especially also responsibilities. Responsibilities towards each other species, and responsibilities towards the global ecosystem. And I am particularly worried about our destruction of the global ecosystem. Many people deny this responsibility they should have towards the global ecosystem. And here I would like to give you a few facts that I found in a book that I warmly recommend, Pedagogies of Collapse, written by the French scholar Ginny Servan-Miklos. I will just quote a number of sentences from her book. The opening sentence is, we are staring collapse in the face. And she continues that we grew up in expectation of progress and meritocracy. So if one works hard to begin with, if you obtain a university degree at the top university like Universitas Erlangga, one can prosper. And the belief in progress, or kemajuan, is very strong in Indonesia. It's probably stronger than in the Netherlands. So kemajuan, progress, also at an individual level. But Ginny Servan-Miklos warns that with the multiple crises of today, and especially the environmental crisis, this belief in endless progress and growth is not possible. A future, I quote, premised upon conditions of economic growth, peace and sustainability is by the very physical realities of our biosphere impossible. Dream we must, dream of a better future, but we dream in a world of chaos, and therein lies the challenge. Servan Miklos argues that in pre-capitalist times, societies were based on principles of reciprocity, mutual help and support, and an exchange of goods and services. And if I can take an example from Indonesia, if you help me planting the bibit in my sawah, I will later help you planting your bibit in your sawah. And if you help me planting bibit now, later you are entitled to help me with the harvest and in return get a part of my harvest, a system of mutual support called bawel that used to be prevalent in Java, but now has more or less disappeared. Now, following Karl Polanyi in his seminal book, The Great Transformation, we have come to understand that with the rise of capitalism, economic relations have become disembedded from social networks. Everything has got an economic price. And what is more, with the rise of capitalism has emerged a belief in a rationally calculating individual. Ultimately, and this is an idea originating with the English economist or philosopher Adam Smith, because of the invisible hand, as it is called, the invisible hand of the price mechanism, all products and services will be produced at the lowest cost to the benefit of all consumers, and we make rational decisions in this. There is one major problem with capitalism. Capitalism, as an economic model, has externalized social and environmental costs of production. In the cost of production, the social and environmental costs are not included. So we pay a price for products which is too low compared. If we had taken the environmental and social costs into account, the price would have been higher. So this is partly a Marxist argument of the social cost, but I will focus on the environmental cost. And there is another problem with capitalism, and it is the need of eternal expansion or eternal growth. That expansion is inherent in capitalism, but also in practical economics, like the enormous national debt of the United States and other countries. And the only way to ward off economic collapse for these countries, because the debt is no longer tolerated by banks, is the promise of further economic growth. So also at a practical level, states need to give the perspective to their citizens, oh, our economy will grow. And here comes the big challenge. We live in and on one world. Imagine the world as a tiny little ball floating in the immense universe, and we cannot get off this little ball. Endless economic expansion, consuming more and more of our resources, is simply impossible. And again, citing from Ginny Servan Miklos, and gave some facts. 70% of all vertebrate animals, these are the mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. 70% of all vertebrate animals have died since my parents, so her parents, were teenagers. So in a lifetime. Of all the mammals left on this planet, 60% are livestock, 36% are humans, and only 4% are wild animals, including everything from rats to blue whales. And another figure from the same book, there are now more human-built materials by mass than the entire natural biosphere. Every tree, every bush, every bird, every mosquito, every flower in the world is now outweighed by concrete, steel, and plastics. And each year, we pour concrete over a surface equivalent to the size of England. And for your information, the size of England is slightly more than the size of the island of Java. So this is covered every year after year, such a size is covered in concrete. I could go on here and give data on global warming. The goal of keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius is already out of sight. We are also close or past so-called tipping points. That the tipping point is that a certain ecosystem has been destroyed to such degree that it has lost the capacity, the natural capacity to restore itself. Such is the case with many coral reefs, for instance, that are dying because of the rising sea temperatures. And the rising, not just the rising sea temperature, but the rising sea level is particularly alarming for countries with major cities just above the sea level or even below the sea level, but behind dikes, as you in Indonesia and we in the Netherlands. We can shake hands here. Let me recapitulate for a moment. So first of all, the idea of global citizenship. I have more to say about this later, but the conclusion for now is that these global citizens are living in one world, on one planet, and they are rapidly destroying its ecosystem. Infinite growth is mathematically impossible on a finite planet, so how did we end up? This is what Sir van Miklas asks. How did we end up with an economic science so divorced from physical reality? So in economic thinking, there is thinking about the price mechanism, but not about the environment. Now, capitalism, or Adam Smith's invisible hand, assumes rational individuals who can take decisions that are best for them. But such rational individuals clearly do not exist. We can explain the lack of rational thought in two ways. First, a psychological way. So the discipline of psychology has discovered several mechanisms why people do not take rational decisions. For instance, the confirmation bias that primes us to only consider evidence that fits with our preconceived beliefs. So if we get new information, we accept information that confirms our ideas, but we tend to ignore or deny information that contradicts our ideas. And a second mechanism, psychological mechanism, is the availability heuristic, a bias that leads us to overestimate the probability of events that we are familiar with and to underestimate the risks that we have never experienced before. Another explanation of why we behave in stupid ways, in irrational ways, is what is called the tragedy of the commons. This is a concept that comes from Gerrit Harding, and he explains it with a metaphor. It's not a real historical example, it's just a thought experiment in his mind, and it goes a bit like this. So imagine you have a village, and they exploit a common, a shared meadow, grass field. So this is called the commons. It's shared. And each family has, say, five sheep, domba, ekkerdomba, have 5 sheep on the commons. And if all have 5 sheep, and sometimes you will slaughter one and then a new sheep will be born, but on average, if all families have 5 sheep, then you can exploit the commons in a sustainable way. There is no overexploitation, and this is a sustainable mechanism. But then at some point, one of the farmers will think, oh, but I want to put a 6th sheep on the commons. And that is a good idea because I will profit from the 6th sheep. I will have a little more wool, a little more milk, a little more meat from my extra sheep. And he also knows, but then there is 1 sheep too many on the commons. So the commons will be overexploited. And that means that all the sheep will have a little less grass to eat. And all the sheep will be a little less healthy than before. But the profit of the extra sheep goes to him, and the loss of the tiny little bit of overexploitation is shared with all the others. But that's not the end, because then another family will have a similar calculation and think, well, my neighbor has 6 sheep, I will do this as well. And again, the full profit from the extra sheep will go to me, but the cost of overexploitation will be shared with others. And then the next farmer will follow the example, and the next one. And then if all have 6 sheep, then perhaps the first farmer will think, I can also put a 7th sheep on the commons. And the same logic continues. And the real tragedy of the commons is that this mechanism continues even if everybody realizes that in the end this will destroy the system, but still it's rational to put an extra sheep on the commons. This is how we are treating our natural resources. Again, let me recap what I've discussed so far. I began with global citizenship. Global citizenship simply means that we are strongly aware of the fact that we belong to a global community, that the globe is one large but ultimately limited space, and that somehow we have to live together in this space. This global citizenship is an imagined community. The term imagined community comes from Benedict Anderson, who used it to refer to national communities, people belonging to one nation. So the Netherlands or Republic Indonesia cannot possibly know all the others of that nation. But nevertheless, the sense of belonging to a community is so strong that people are willing to fight and to die for their country, like many Indonesians during the revolution against the colonial Dutch state, Samen Revolutie. And this community has to be imagined because, again, one cannot know all the others individually, and the bonding is therefore imagined in our mind, but no less real than, say, in kinship groups. Now, this concept of imagined community can also apply to global citizenship, but unfortunately, not everybody feels. Again, I apologize for I have a bit of a sore throat. Unfortunately, not everybody feels this global citizenship to the same degree, and even less do we tend to live up to the consequences. Global citizenship is yet mostly an ideal and not a reality. I now get to the second part of my presentation, global citizenship education. And now I want to direct me especially to the students in the audience. I don't know how many people there are in the audience, how many students, but this is for you. I can imagine that when you came to the Universitas Erlangen, it was so difficult to believe in this ideal if powerful people violate basic principles of global citizenship. Of all global citizenship denialists, Donald Trump makes most headlines. I take Donald Trump as an example, and I will come back on Donald Trump later. As an example of global citizenship denialism, but you can think yourself of similar examples of egoism, for instance, by the Indonesian elite, Indonesian politicians, and the same applies to politicians and the elite in the Netherlands. But also a similar denialism can also be found at a small scale. It's not necessarily people in power or the rich people. Now, can you, in the face of such blatant egoism, still believe in global citizenship? How can I give you, as a teacher, some hope for the future? I'm a bit looking at Boelina about the time and how much longer I can continue. And how the audience is looking at the screen, is getting tired. Let me, I make a small digression here and want to analyze your generation, the generation of students at our universities. And building on Karl Mannheim's theory of generations, it can be argued that each generation goes through particular historical periods and as a consequence of formative events experienced during their youth, develop similar beliefs and comparable habitus. Generation intersects with class, ethnicity, gender, and individual personality, and simplified characterizations of such generations must be scrutinized. You must be critical of the thinking in generations. Nevertheless, it is widely assumed that as a consequence of the shared outlook and patterns of behavior, each generation or age cohort has particular learning needs and requires particular teaching styles. The students currently populating our universities have been labeled Generation Z or Centennials, born between 1995 and 2010. So that is you in the audience now. And one unquestionable fact is that you have, or they, when I say they, I mean you, I will mix they and you. You are digital natives that have grown up with smartphones and social media. Your online and offline activities are naturally integrated and mutually implied. Centennials have been described as technology dependent, open-minded, loyal, and preoccupied by practical issues. And thanks to the internet, Centennials have become very aware of local and global societal challenges. Centennials want to make an impact. They are willing to support gender and racial equality and fight poverty and civil rights violations. And in research conducted in the United States, Centennials are said to be more likely to have friends with different ethnic identities or different sexual orientations. Diversity is expected and embraced. So the opportunity to work for a good cause may drive Centennials more than financial advancement. These are all very positive characteristics, I would say. However, Centennials, this cohort, is also characterized by living in what has been called a VUCA world. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the American Psychological Association asserts that this generation is most likely to have poor mental health and suffer from anxiety, pessimism, and depression. And this anxiety is partly evoked by 24/7 access to global news, which is often of a depressing nature. And the story about what I just told about the environment is, of course, a perfect example. Not just an example, it's perhaps at the core of this depressing world. And some scholars argue, but I'm not sure this is true, so please forgive me, I'm saying this. I'm not convinced I agree with it, but I want to mention some scholars argue that Centennials have underdeveloped social skills because of looking too much on their phone and not seeing each other face to face. And Centennials are concerned about emotional safety. Constant availability of an online world can cause sleep disruption, tension, and FOMO, the fear of missing out. Now, the arrival of this new generation of Centennials, or Generation Z, at university, with new learning styles, new ambitions for their lives, and new worries about the VUCA world, calls for development of new teaching styles and new research topics that are not only relevant from a scientific viewpoint, but also meets the thirst for relevant knowledge of the Centennials. And what Centennials Generation Z would help is an anthropology of care. An anthropology of care in a double sense. First, Centennials care for the world and want to make a positive impact to better the world, socially and environmentally. And second, facing many processes that cause anxiety in them, Centennials as a cohort yearn for being cared for. And this brings me to the third part of my lecture, a note on anthropology. So anthropology is one of the social sciences, and I'm an anthropologist, I should have mentioned. Anthropologist is one of the social sciences, and it distinguishes itself in various respects, and I want to mention only two that are relevant at this point. And the first is that, anthropologists look at culture, but even more important for anthropologists is that we try to understand the world through the eyes of our interlocutors, through the eyes of the people themselves. How do they make sense of the world? How do they see the world? And we try to, as starting point of our analysis, we try to listen very carefully what people have to say. And the second key characteristic of anthropology is cultural relativism. So all different cultures or lifestyles are equally valid and equally important and equally interesting. So you cannot say one is better or superior or more developed than others. Anthropologists would never do that. Now, anthropology can contribute to finding answers to these wicked problems I've just sketched without falling into the pitfall of overly simplified answers. So what anthropology always tries to do, the role of anthropology, and here I quote a very interesting textbook by Crew and Axelby. Anthropology's role has been to complicate sustainable development, to reveal its tensions and contradictions, to acknowledge that it is difficult, to probe and to ask questions. Sometimes we ask more questions than that we are able to answer them, I must confess. Empathy for the other and resistance to reducing empirical complexity to quantifiable indicators make anthropology eminently suited to take the initiative in academic decolonization, as we call it, and to push back the individualism of the neoliberal university. I could go on a little about ways how to teach anthropology and also some innovative educational experiments I had in mind. I might do this later in the discussion if time allows. But I would like to come to the end and of my presentation, which still will take a few minutes. And the end is a letter I have written and a letter that I want to read out to you. It's a letter that I wrote a few weeks ago. And the letter is to an imaginary imaginary is the right word here, an imaginary future student, a student that still has to arrive at our universities, Universitas Erlangga or Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam or any other university in the world. And it goes like this. Dear future student, let's call you Camille. Camille is a nice international and gender-neutral name. And interestingly, last year I was supervising a master student from Indonesia, and her name was Camille. So the name is very appropriate. Let's call you Camille. A nice international and gender-neutral name. All students, regardless nationality, gender, age, religion, and so on, are welcome in this course, the Introduction on Anthropology, and welcome at our university. So welcome to this Introduction to Anthropology. One of the key concepts is global citizenship. At its core, global citizenship simply means that we are strongly aware of the fact that we belong to a global community, that the globe is a large but ultimately limited space. So I'm summarizing what I've argued so far. And that somehow we have to live together in this space. Following Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen, all humans have an equal right to develop the full potential as a human being. Global citizenship, however, does not come only with rights, but especially also responsibilities. Responsibilities towards each other, other species, and the global ecosystem. But global citizenship is yet mostly an ideal and not a reality. And I can imagine that when you come to our university, it's so difficult to believe in this ideal. If powerful people violate basic principles of global citizenship, of all global citizenship denialists, Donald Trump makes most headlines, and already mentioned this before. Donald Trump's slogan, electoral slogan, a slogan used in elections, "Make America Great Again," and "America First," is explicitly anti-global citizenship. And it has not stayed a slogan. He rules according to the might is right idea. He uses military violence to try to get it his way. As a few months ago, an unprovoked and unannounced attack on Iran, or unannounced attacks on ships that, according to the Americans, are transporting drugs. So remember Pearl Harbor, Mr. President. He manipulates and puts force on his friends and allies. He lowers taxes for the super rich while cutting the budget of social welfare and development programs. He excludes women and transgender persons from leading positions and the rank and file of the army as second-rate humans. He has stimulated a fossil fuel-driven economy, ignoring the fact that climate change is destroying the lives of many humans and other species. Can you, new student Camille, in the face of such blatant egoism, still believe in global citizenship? How can I give you, as your teacher, some hope for the future? Now, perhaps anthropology will help you to find some optimism and confidence in this egoistic world. Born from colonialism, anthropology has a suspicious pedigree, but it's also rooted in curiosity about other humans, and it's one of the disciplines which has internalized reflection and self-criticism. Decolonization is now a buzzword at our university, and to me that means if you are in a privileged position, take a step aside and make room for others in the center. Hey, Mr. President, how about that? Take a step aside and leave room for others in the center. And I realize when I'm saying this, it's a bit weird when you have my face on your giant screen, and but still, I think it's exactly for that reason I want to make this point. We have to take a step aside. How much better the world could have been if some populist leaders, and not only Donald Trump, had taken my introductory course in anthropology. Anthropologists would rightly ask whether global citizenship is a European or Eurocentric concept. Nationalist leaders in the past, like your President Suharto, but also Muhammad Mahathir of Malaysia or Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, once remarked that the so-called human rights, the universal human rights, are a Western invention rooted in the French Revolution and reflecting Western values of individualism. They had a point, but that critique doesn't make human rights less valuable and should not legitimize them to suppress the rights of individuals in their countries. If only they had taken my classes. No, though the global citizenship entails more than human rights. It's not only about rights, but also about responsibilities and care. Care for other humans and the global ecosystem. Some anthropologists love to speak about non-human actors nowadays, but it helps analysis if we assign agency not only to animals, whales, but then also mosquitoes, but also to say objects, our phone or material, waste, sampah, my favorite topic of research, or rivers. I'm not convinced. But it does help to think of non-human actors having rights. Decolonization means taking a step aside when you are at the center. Global citizenship for me also means understanding the historical boundedness and imperfection of our thoughts and values. Let's therefore not cancel people from the past because they do not meet our current values anymore. And to give just a few examples, Montesquieu, famous for the Trias Politica, was a blatant racist. John Locke, champion of liberalism, was also defending the rights of white Americans to have black slaves. Immanuel Kant, the famous philosopher, has written about the necessity of euthanasia of Jews. So this is all terrible racist arguments. And I can give more examples. But let's try to look at these famous scholars, philosophers, social scientists, through their contemporary standards and recognize what great insights they have brought to us. If only the political leaders of today, the Trumps, the Putins, and the Geert Wilders in the Netherlands would take this course and understand the historical boundedness of their own righteousness. If only they would take this introduction to anthropology and learn about global citizenship. So Camille, welcome to the university and welcome to this course, Introduction to Anthropology. What a great day it would be if you look around and introduce yourself to the student next to you. He's a bit older than you, but all students are welcome, regardless nationality, gender, age, and so on. He's wearing a blue jacket and a red necktie. His blonde hair is modeled with a hair dryer. Hello, I'm Camille. You introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Donald. En sekian dulu. This is what I wanted to tell. Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Frick. Amazing as usual. The standard of Pak Frick is always give us something that make us always think and rethink all the time. Okay, Pak Frick, for your information, by right now, this room, this is in Asek Tower, if you still remember.
Of
that
course.
on the that on Majapahit room, completely conquered, equipped by more than 100 students. So they are the really, really global citizens that you have mentioned before. Okay, so I think by right now, I would like to invite questions or reflections from all the audiences, especially from the students. Perhaps from Pak Frick perspective, it will help us to rethink about the globalization, more specifically about the concept and then also the practices of the global citizenship. Okay, I invite, please introduce yourself briefly before posing your questions. Okay, great. No question means bad news, you know? Yes? Okay, okay. There's one question from this side. Okay, from this wing. Introduce yourself.
Check, check. Excuse me, Mr. Frick, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Torik. I'm from the Japanese Studies of Universitas Airlangga, and I would like to reflect upon something. So you talk about global citizenship and that we are essentially interconnected. So should we also take accountability for others as global citizenship? Should we also take others' mistake and accountability for their mistake? So, and if that's the case, then is there anything we can do as global citizenship to, how do I say this? Merenungkan in English, to think about this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very good question. Torik or Tovik was your name? I couldn't fully hear your name, but that was a very good question. The global citizenship for me, the most important is to step aside, well, to think of the limits of our world, that we are part of it, and that somehow we have to take a step aside if you are at the center and to reduce our impact. But it certainly also includes being responsible for others in the world, and that in the double sense of taking care of them. So care for me is a crucial word, a key word, but also sometimes you have to address others who don't behave in a responsible manner. Something that is really important in the Netherlands, and it must be important in Indonesia as well, is the fighting in Gaza. And there's just a ceasefire, but we have to see whether this will hold. But in the past 2 years, there has been enormous violence committed by the Israeli state in Gaza. And I'm always careful in the Netherlands have to be very careful not to say Jews. It's not about Jews, it's about the Israeli state. And to what extent are we in the Netherlands can be held accountable for the violence there? And this has been a huge discussion at our university, as it also was at American universities. I don't know whether you had similar discussions at Indonesian universities, where our students held university accountable for the violence in Gaza, because they argued our university still has institutional contacts with some Israeli universities, as we indeed used to have, and that makes us complicit in the genocide of Palestinians. And so these are extremely difficult issues, because on the one hand, yeah, how can I be held accountable, or how can we be held accountable for the genocide in Gaza? But at the same time, it is true that our university has a relationship with some Israeli universities, and should we continue these relationships? So in the Netherlands, we have had mass demonstrations, national demonstrations, not at universities, but in either The Hague, the seat of our government, or Amsterdam, the capital, Ibu Kota of the Netherlands, where many people felt responsible, Dutch people felt responsible for the genocide in Gaza, and urged the Dutch government, you must take your responsibility and put pressure on the government of Israel, stop the violence. And you can make similar arguments of the violence of the United States, or the environmental destruction also by the Netherlands themselves. So I don't want to be held accountable individually for the misbehavior or the lack of global citizenship in others, but at the same time, we can take action, and we can protest, and we can try to urge, especially if these concern our friends, friendly nations, friendly people, change your behavior. So yeah, the short answer to your question is, can we be held accountable for others? I think we can, and we have a role to play there. We have a responsibility.
Thank you, Pak Frick. I invite another question. Yes. No more question? Maybe students really need time to rethink, Pak Frick. Oh, okay, there is one more question. Okay, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So before that, I would like to say thank you to Professor Frick that already talking about today's topic, and it's really interesting to say in this for a young generation. But today I want to ask one question, but before that I would bring one context. So in this era of globalization, young people
Sorry, could you say who are you, something
Oh,
like that?
okay, ma'am. I'm sorry. Okay, before that, my name is Kotruna Danadia Mareta, and I'm from English Literature. And today I would like to bring in one context before I ask the question. So in this era of globalization, young people are increasingly exposed to diverse cultures, values, and ways of thinking. While this creates new opportunities for connection, it also raises questions about how deeply we understand one another beyond surface level interactions. And also the idea of global citizenship sounds inspiring, yet it also challenges us to think critically about what it truly means. And my questions, Professor Frick, so from your perspective, does the growing global exposure among young people genuinely foster meaningful intercultural understanding, or are we at risk of developing a more superficial sense of global identity? And how can we guide the young generation to build cross-cultural connections that are both authentic and ethnically grounded? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's another very good question, and you really raise very important issues. So I can, but it's a tiny corner of my screen. I can get some idea of the audience sitting in your room, but I have no idea about your background. At our university, we have some of the classes, and certainly anthropology classes, have a very international student population. And there we get similar discussions and similar issues. So with globalization, there is some homogenization. So throughout the world, we learn things and we adopt certain behavior. So we listen to the same K music, and everywhere in the world we can go to McDonald's. But nevertheless, there are also important cultural differences, and I think it's important to hold on to our respective cultures, not to defend them against intruding cultural elements. So we don't should be defensive, but I think it's important to hold on to our own culture and to cherish our own traditions, because they give you a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. And so it helps you to root in this world. But then, with this respect for your own individual culture, I think exactly for that reason, you can meet others. So what we have in our classroom is that, for instance, we speak about kinship. How is kinship organized? Who do you consider your family? Who are important in your family? Which kinship terms do you use? And starting from the diversity and the differences, students discover, oh, but you do it in a different way than we do at home. So if we take an example of Minangkabau, suppose I would have a Minangkabau student in my classroom, we'll talk about lineages. And Mamak, a mother's brother, as an important person in the upbringing of the children, which is still the case, as I studied not so long ago it's some time ago, in the Padang. So by sharing your respective experiences about kinship, about love, about what do you expect for the future, how to interact with the environment, do you have local practices of sustainable behavior? What do you think about the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Palestinians? What do you think about the role of the United States and all these different traditions and views and local views? Exactly. Because they are different, and then you confront each other with your respective views, but you do this with respect for others. So not claiming, I know what is right and you are wrong, but exactly stepping aside and making room for other views and other opinions. That I think exactly doing that. So from your own background, holding on, taking your own values and traditions and culture as starting point, and then connect with others, that truly will help building a global citizenship. So global citizenship does not mean we all have to become the same. On the contrary, we must respect our differences and from there build bridges and think in terms of global citizenship.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Frick. We still have time. Maybe I may invite one more question. Yes. Suddenly, so many questions coming on the last minutes.
Good afternoon,
Okay,
Professor. My name is Isa Rasas from Erlangen University. Thank you for your presentation, and I have a question. You mentioned that infant growth is mathematically impossible on a finite planet. In your opinion, what kind of alternative economic model could replace capitalism while still ensuring human well-being? Thank you.
Yeah, that's another great question and really hard to answer. I certainly don't have a clear answer here. But we need to think along two lines. And one is we really must, well, first of all, we must be aware of the problem. And I think we all know about the problem, but are we really aware of it? So take the issue of transportation. And so we know if we all start driving cars or motorcycles, and then if you're richer, you drive a car, this is not sustainable. This is changing the climate because of air pollution. So we should look for other means of transportation, public transportation. Within a city, you can use bikes. Surabaya is, because it's near the coast, it's a flat city. You could easily drive bikes if you had more trees to create shade for the bikers. So there are solutions, but we're not willing to do it. So are we really aware of the need? We must change our behavior. That's one thing that we can work on. To look for a more circular economy. So don't waste your resources, but reuse them and organize the economy, organize the production of products to make more a circular economy. And this is partly a matter of the behavior of consumers, so we can do this ourselves, but it's also partly a matter of of the state regulations. So that's one thing, how to rebuild our economy in a more circular and sustainable way. But there's also another thing, and that is this expectation of we always need more in terms of material goods. We really must let go of that thought. So economic growth is no longer in terms, I have a bigger house, I have a bigger car. First I have one motorcycle, now I have two motorcycles. I have more lavish meals, I have more clothes to choose from. But stop thinking or aspiring to economic growth, and we should even try to diminish our wealth, and it doesn't mean we have to become poorer, but look at the growth in non-material things. So perhaps work less, produce less, and spend more time just hanging out with friends and enjoying each other's companies. And that is more enriching, perhaps, no, not perhaps, I'm convinced, spending time with friends, doing things together is certainly more enriching than trying to make money to buy a motorcycle and then a second motorcycle and a third motorcycle. I also know, making this point, that there are enormous income differences in the world, and that the West is far richer, historically has become richer than the global South. So if you think about we must diminish our consumption, then firstly I'm looking at countries in the global North, but it also applies, certainly also applies to countries like Indonesia.
Okay, Pak Frick. I can see that the student is very enthusiastic. Oh my goodness. How many? Okay. Please raise your hands. How many of you? 1, 2. Okay. No more. 2. Okay. Okay. I think she is raising her hand first. Okay, you go first. Make it that very short. Yeah. Please introduce your name.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. So my name is Zulaika, and my question is, as we are in a digital and modern era, and as a young global citizen myself, how does digital globalization reshape our understanding of accountability as a global citizenship? Like, there are like several like online activism and like other things online. So how can we ensure online accountability remains fair, informed, and ethical? And how can our actions meaningfully address systematic global like problems like that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Zulaika. That's a very good question. Digital globalization, this is very about to the core of the concept of globalization, the increased speed of the increased connectivity of different parts of the world. And this online meeting in itself is, of course, an amazing example that I'm sitting here in the Netherlands, you are sitting in Indonesia, and we can discuss things. That's great. And the increase of the speed of globalization is really incredible. I can remember the first time I went to Indonesia. Now, this really is some time ago, but still within a lifetime. 1985 was my very first visit to Indonesia. I did field work in a small village, a really small village in Kerawang, Kabupaten Kerawang, Jawa Barat. And if I wanted to communicate with the Netherlands, I had to post a letter, I had to write a letter. find the post office. This took me several hours to travel from the village to the nearest post office, post a letter. Then the letter would go by airmail to the Netherlands, and then if, say, my parents would reply the letter immediately, I would have their response in 2 weeks' time. So this is before we had internet, before we could use WhatsApp, before mobile phones. You have no ideas how slow communication used to be at the time. And now everything we know instantly what's happening across the world. We can follow what's happening in any country of the world, and this brings us closer. So the opportunities of this the digital world and digital globalization, as you called it, the opportunities are enormous. And it has increased our awareness of global citizenship. So I think on the whole, it's great. But sometimes it's also problematic because it's also depressing. So we read about hurricanes in other parts of the world, and we read about accidents where hundreds of people can be killed in one accident, one typhoon, one. So it's also depressing, but it also opens opportunities for, just like in the past month, generation Z, the centennials, your generation, going to the street and to demonstrate against authoritarian regimes. And we stimulate each other. So I also see it as a big source of inspiration. You learn about activists in other parts of the world and you follow their example. And that also applies to, and with all the other problems, there are very many very serious problems, but by far the most fundamental problem is the environmental destruction. This is what worries me more than anything else. And reading, hearing, and making contact with other people in other parts of the world, that helps mobilizing forces. We must change our behavior. We must put pressure on our governments. We must put pressure on large companies to behave in a more sustainable manner. So overall, I think there are enormous opportunities here, and we must make use of them.
Okay, Pak Frick, I think there is one more questions, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zarina Nazir. I am from Pakistan. So thank you so
Alaikum
much for giving me this opportunity. So I would like to ask a question from Prof. Freak. Considering the dynamics of power, culture, and morality in a changing world, how do you think global shift in power structures impact local cultural identities and moral frameworks in non-Western societies?
In non-Western societies. Yeah, the international power structures are of course extremely important, and we are forced, especially in Europe, but I think also in Asian countries, we are forced to think about it much more than before, because United States used to be a friend, an ally of us, and that's no longer the case. Now there is a government in the United States that forces us to do things that we don't want. So we are much more aware, and actually I think many countries in the global south were aware of this, has always been aware of the global inequalities in power, and now we in Europe, we learn this the hard way as well. So also in a cultural manner, of course there's inequality, and there is influence from the United States or perhaps also European countries in other parts of the world. So McDonald's has spread from United States, going all over the world, and now we're all using McDonald's, although perhaps we had delicious local food, and why on earth would you eat a hamburger? I really don't understand. Or American music, American movies, and so on. But especially in these cultural aspects, and I think Paulina already said this at the start when she introduced this afternoon session, especially in cultural exchange, it's no longer coming from one part in the world. And we in Europe, we also we eat Pakistani food and we eat Indonesian food and we listen to K music. And there's so many things. Buddhism has a big impact in Europe, and also as a, perhaps not so much as a religion, but as a more philosophical way of accepting things. And so, yeah, there is cultural exchange and influencing, but it's not a one-way influence. So there are inequalities of power, but it doesn't always mean that, oh, there's one side, one country is always more powerful than others. And the impact, the mutual impact goes in all different directions.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Frick. What I can say is that within the last 30 minutes, it seems that you really strengthen our awareness that we are really part of these global citizens. So physically, you may be here, but I'm sure at the same time, I can see people look it down on their phone. Maybe they are searching what is going on in Pakistan, for example, in the border with the India, what's going on with China, with the India, what's going on with the Gaza. And even they want to know where Pak Frick by right now. So it means that some of them have an opportunity to physically visit other places in crossing the many borders in the world. But even although they are sitting in this room, actually they are really traveling, wandering. Thank you very much, Pak Frick, for whatever you have shared with us. I'm sure that this is really worth it for everyone here. And I challenge for all the students here, so this is really the time for all of us to rethink who we are, right? That no matter you are the students of Universitas Airlangga, but don't forget you are also part of the global citizens with all the responsibilities. But Frick really remind us, caring, what else? Bad dreams sometimes, but please be always positive. Thank you very much, Pak Frick, and hopefully that tomorrow everything with your inauguration will be very successful. Professor Frick, thank you very much. Meet you again.
Excuse me, Ma'am Lina.
Yeah?
Before we start into the next speaker, may we have a couple of minutes to give appreciation to Prof. Frick?
Oh yeah, so
symbolically.
how to do?
Okay. For Professor Frick, please don't turn off the Zoom yet, because after this, we would like to give token of appreciation symbolically, and the token of appreciation will be given by Lina Parianti, SSM Hum PhD, as the head of Language Center Universitas Airlangga, to Dewi Meria Shawati, SSMA M Hum PhD, as the representation of Professor Frick. Okay.
Okay, so how it okay.
But you already have expressed your nice words, Bolina Bu Devi. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I much appreciate. And once again, I also want to congratulate you with your anniversary, but I also want to make you a compliment for organizing this. And it's really great to see that not so long ago this would have been too difficult to organize. And now we have this excellent online connection and this beautiful room, this meeting room. And I also want to compliment the students for the excellent English, because not so long ago, if I would give a presentation in Indonesia, I would speak Indonesian. At least I would try to speak as best as I could with all my language errors, but it's great that we can do it in English, because whether we like it or not, this is also a matter of power, of course. Why do we speak English and not Bahasa Indonesia or Urdu or Russian or any other language? But we do speak English. English is the language of international communication, and that is really important that we speak one language to think of global citizenship. So once again, thank you, and also thank you for the symbolic token of appreciation. And I wish you all the best for the remaining of this afternoon. And I'm sorry I have to leave. So it's I really would wish I could stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Freek. So I'm going to keep this and waiting and looking forward to your coming here to Surabaya. Okay, thank you.
Terima kasih, Bude.
Once again, give applause to Professor Freek. Thank you, Professor Freek, for the time, and also thank you for Ma'am Lina and Ma'am Dewi. You may go back to your seat so that we give the time and moment to Ma'am Lina as the moderator to continue to the next speaker. Now, time is yours.
Okay, everyone, after we are traveling, now I will bringing you to another, how is it, travel, another adventure by giving opportunity for Dr. Arum Budiastuti, like expose us with the halalization. I mean that when we are talking about halalization, maybe in micro life, we find the many title of a halal in some products, right? But by right now, Bu Arum will bring us to give you like a bigger ideas, bigger exposure. What is halal? What is halalization in a global scope? Okay, Bu Arum, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm truly delighted to be here and to speak about a topic that has become my research object in the past few years. Professor Freek have talked about global citizenship and how globalization have brought us together as global citizens. And today I'm going to speak about an example of how globalization enables a form of transformation that has changed our perceptions and consumption practices and the way we understand ourselves and our identity. And that transformation is called halalization. Before I move on, I'd like to ask our audience here, are you aware of, do you feel any changes happening around you related to halal? So for example, in the past, we never problematize halal, okay? So when we eat or when we buy certain food, we never ask the sellers, is it halal? Okay, that didn't happen in the past. That didn't happen like 20 or 30 years ago. But nowadays, when we buy some food in malls or in the market, it is normal for us to ask, excuse me, is the food halal? Do you also feel that kind of, have you ever asked that kind of questions to the sellers? Maybe in the malls, or maybe you are looking at any signs of halal in the malls? So for example, if you want to buy certain ramen or a Japanese food or Korean food, do you look for a halal sign on the premise? Yeah. Yeah, that's normal, or that quite common today. But in the past, that didn't happen. Yeah, like 30 years ago, we never look at signs because we assume that everything is halal. But that is not the case anymore. Okay, next. Thank you very much. So this transformation was evident when Zoya, are you familiar with this brand? Zoya is a Muslim fashion brand. And in 2013 or 14, it issued an advertisement. And the caption is, yakin hijab yang kita gunakan halal? Okay, that was a question that was quite controversial at that time. And for those who are not Indonesian, this caption translates into, are you sure that the hijab you are wearing is halal. Okay, so that's what the caption is about. In the first glance, we may think that the word halal there refers to the concept of modesty in dressing, yeah? Or maybe it's how to use, the veil in a proper way. But the explanation given by Zoya in its Instagram account at that time surprised many people. Halal, in this caption, in this advertisement, means that the production process of the hijab does not involve any pork and alcohol. So it's quite similar to food. This explanation by Zoya officials, some of them quite supportive of this idea that hijab is equalized as food, but many people are also contrary to the idea, saying that, oh, this is a marketing gimmick. How come a hijab contain pork, contain pig, or contain alcohol? It's just a marketing gimmick. But despite all the controversy at that time, other brands follow suit. And soon after that, you find a lot of brands or products also advertise themselves as halal. Next slide, please. So this is one of the first products, non-food products that advertise themselves as halal. Do you ever encounter these advertisements on YouTube or maybe when you are scrolling your social media? A refrigerator that is advertised as halal. Yeah, halal, the first halal certified fridge. But now it is very common to find halal pans, frying pans, halal shoes. What else? Halal shampoo. What else? Can you mention anything? Skincare. Yes, halal skincare. What else? Yeah, halal everything. Halal hotel. Yes? Or syariah. Hotel syariah. Yeah. What else? Halal tourism. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Halal beach. In halal beach, you may not wear any swimsuits, yeah? Halal pork is quite controversial. Okay. So scholars have described all this transformation as halalization. Some call it as halalification, and some call it as pan-halalization, which is the extension of halal from food to non-food. Okay, so as you can see, halal brushes, halal blah, 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 yeah? And it highlights the proliferation of halal across a multitude of commodified forms. Halalization has become a worldwide movement entering various aspects of consumers' life and industries, and a global halal industry worth 2.3 trillion worldwide, and its growth rate is about 6.2% annually, covering sectors such as the food, pharmaceutical, cosmetics, fashion, travel, and media or recreation. Next. Halalization refers to not only the expansion of halal certified products and services, but also the increasing institutionalization of halal across national borders and trade. Scholars understand halalization as a site where religious authority, state power, and market logics meet, producing new forms of Muslim subjectivity and transforming everyday consumption into a space of moral governance. Such accounts illuminate how halalization operates through the entanglements of religion, governance, and commerce, but they tend to foreground expansion and institutionalization without fully addressing the meaning of halal itself is being reconfigured in this process. And in the current process of halalization, halal is defined in certain ways. And my argument is that halalization is not only the extension of halal standards across or beyond food, it also represents an effort to redefine halal as 100% halal. So the intense focus is on material purity. Halalization reshapes the understanding and regulation of halal with implications not only economically, but also politically and culturally. And in this talk, I'm not going to talk about all the complicated ideas regarding the theoretical perceptions or theoretical elaborations. But I'm going to talk about how halalization comes to be. Why halal, like we know today, happens. How come? So I'm going to talk about the history. Next slide, please. A historical trajectory of halalization. So first of all, halalization is actually not an isolated phenomenon. Okay, we can find similar phenomenon in other cultures or other phenomena like Ayurvedic wellness, which is quite popular in India, and also kosher food industry in Jewish world, and also the Christian branded markets in Christianity. So halal and all of these are part of broader ethical consumption markets. Next. So what is the origin? Where does all this comes from? So there are two early drivers, which is explained in an account by Birgit Blacker. First of all is the Muslim migration to non-Muslim countries. So when Muslims migrated to non-Muslim countries, their need or the necessity for halal food increases. And because there was such rare food, which is halal, they demand a certification of halal. I need halal food, so how can I get halal food? So with the increase of migrants to these non-Muslim countries, the attention to halal food is increasing. And that's why the attention to halal is also increasing. Secondly, the major driver is the Iranian Revolution. Are you familiar or do you know anything about the Iranian Revolution? Do you know Ayatollah Khomeini? Yeah, okay. This event was a major driver of many processes happening in the world today, including Islamization, including halalization. Okay, before Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran was ruled by the called Shah Iran, yeah, who was very close to the US or Western countries. And at that time, the trade, halal meat trade was very common. And at that time, the meat trade does not require any halal certification. Okay, so meat sold by Australia, for example, by the US coming to Iran was not accompanied by any halal certification because it's based on mutual trust. Okay, my American friends, Australian friends, I trust that your meat is halal, so you don't need to provide any certification. But after Ayatollah Khomeini took the rule, the authority, he banned all meat coming from Western countries. Okay, so no more meat from Western countries. And of course, these have caused quite a chaos at that time in international trade. Australia, like the biggest meat exporters at that time, Europe as well, yeah, they were confused and they were like quite a chaos. And finally, all these exporting countries had or manage their own halal certification and put extra attention on how to produce halal meat at that time in Australia and also in the US, in Europe as well. Another process accompanying all these is the global forces, yeah, like Islamic revitalization and also consumer capitalism. At that time, like the 1970s, 1980s, Islamic revitalization came to the fore. So all these young Muslim living in non-Muslim countries feel the need to express their identity more. And they tend to consume more religious products, including halal food. On the other hand, in trade, the WTO's, do you know WTO's? It's World Trade Office. Okay, it's an office, an international office taking care of the international trade. So they are making or constructing all these codes, alimentarius, it's a kind of code, trade codes for products, yeah? And Malaysia at that time demanded to have a certain codes for halal food. So basically, halal certification today owes to the efforts of Malaysia. So what's happening in this halalization is a conjuncture of all these process. Yeah, it's not just it's not happening in isolation. It's a conjuncture of all these process condensed and enabling a certain kind of standardization and globalization of halal certification. Next. And this is also very interesting. You know that religious or religion is a very complicated world. Yeah, it compasses a lot of values, which is impossible to define in a detailed way because it's very complex, it's very dependent, and it's discursive. And of course, in Islam itself, it has a lot of schools. Yeah, we have Sunni, we have Shia, and also other schools. And in Sunni itself has a lot of teachings. But there is this person, yeah, Muhammad Munir Chaudhry and also Riaz. These are food technologists or industrialists who are trying to translate Islamic teaching into industry. So they wrote a book. They consult religious fatwas available in English, and they wrote a book called Halal Food Production, which has become immensely popular among halal food industry in the world. So it has been cited like thousands of times. And Gotha said that it has become the industrial standard of halal food production worldwide, inventing a consensual halal tradition. So the halal certification happening today refers to this book. Yeah. Next. Now this is the last frontier. Yeah, the newest development of halalization, which is halal logistics and supply chain. So, and what is very interesting about this, yeah? Okay, before I move on, are you familiar with the word logistics? What logistics are, supply chain, things like that, before I move on, so we are on the same page. Supply chain, logistics, any idea? What are those? Logistics? Any word that comes in your mind when you hear the word logistics? Port. Okay, good. What else? Transport. Very good. What else? Shipping. Excellent. What else? Logistics. Supply chain. Supply chain. Logistics. Yes, okay, that's the idea. Yeah, supply chain is the chain of supply. So we take products from one sources and we deliver that products into various places using logistics. Okay, so by ships, by trucks, yeah, containers, whatever. Okay, so these, how to make logistics halal. Okay, so it's not only the food is halal, but the supply chain, the logistics, the transport is also have to be halal. So how to make it? And interestingly, okay, this idea does not come from Muslim world. So this idea, interestingly, emerged from non-Muslim access, first of all, in the Netherlands, in Port Rotterdam. So with the rise of halal products, some officials in Port Rotterdam is a very famous port in Netherlands, they wanted to sell a niche products to businessmen or producers there in England, in Netherlands, saying that I sell you a dedicated space and shipment for your halal products. Okay, so this space or storage and my shipment or my trucks all is halal. So because everything is segregated or separated, we will ensure that your halal products is separated from non-halal products. So that's the idea of halal logistics or supply chain. And it's developed to ensure separation and traceability from farm to fork. So from taking the products from the factory and then deliver it to the end users, it is ensured that the products are halal. But at that time, these efforts was quite unsuccessful because it's quite expensive. But then there is a more successful actor called Marco Tiemann, who is also Dutch. Okay, he was a Dutch industrialist, and he was specialized in organic supply chain. Okay, so at that time it was in 2010, early 2010. He was visiting Malaysia, who asked for a consultation regarding organic trade, and then he asked to the officials at Malaysian government saying that, so how is halal logistics is handled here? The Malaysian people, the Malaysian officials were puzzled because we never thought about that. We never thought about how halal food should be handled by halal shipment. So then Marco Tiemann thought that it was a great idea to offer a halal logistics. Okay, so the idea of halal logistics, once again, does not come from the Muslim world, but non-Muslim industrialists who wanted to make halal as a business. Okay, and at the time we are speaking now, these halal logistics was adopted by Malaysia, in Thailand, also in Indonesia itself. Yeah. Next. Okay, so this is the idea of halal supply chain from farm to fork, from really end consumers. And next. Right. So these are the key characteristics of halalization. After we talk about the history, and we are talking about the characteristics of halalization. First of all, the epistemic foundation. Yeah. Halal certification today is rooted in modern Western systems of classifications. Okay? As we learned previously, it's not about, because halal is highly discursive or tradition, we don't apply classification, but classification is so Western. Yeah, it's a Western tradition. And when we try to put halal as an industry, this Western idea of classification applies. Secondly is dependence on technology. So halalization cannot live without technology because halal is certified through technology. Lab tests, yeah, DNA technology, blockchain, RFID, QR tracking, to ensure 100% halal throughout all traceability. So if you are aware now today, today there is a device like pregnancy test. Do you know pregnancy test? A pregnancy kit? But now we have that for halal products. So if you want to check whether your meat contains pork, you can easily test it using that device, and the result will come up within minutes. You will know that, oh, this food contains pork. So that's happening nowadays, with technology. Number three is that halalization is driven by market logic. So halal equals to quality, safety, and brand trust. For example, like Nestle, you know that Nestle is quite massive. It was one of the first companies that applied for halal certification, and followed by a lot of other companies. And it's not only about religion. Now halal stands also for brand trust. Okay, if it is halal certified, then it must be good. Yeah. Sometimes when we are buying a certain skincare, for example, what are you looking for in on the packaging? I'm asking the girls here, or the boys also who wear skincare. When you buy skincare products, what items? First, what are you looking at? Ingredients, very good. What else? The price. Yeah, that's very important, yeah. Price, what else? BPOM, definitely, yes, whether it is safe or not. And then halal certification, whether it is halal. Because as you may read in many news, that some skincare contain big items or porcine elements, or alcohol in it. So some concerned Muslim consumers are looking for that halal logos on skincare products. And this is also interesting. I'm going to introduce a useful concept that might be useful to understand all of these, which is Michel Calon is a French scholar, and he is from STS, Science and Technology Studies. He called this the concept or notion of economy of qualities. So economy of qualities, products are classified as having certain attributes, yeah? So the product attributes such as 100% halal are constructed, stabilized, and disseminated through material devices, protocols, and expert protocols at expert networks, yeah? So the halal products is not only handled by religious people, like people from the MUI, but also handled by the science people. Yeah, because economic quality applies here. Next. The next idea is, so how, after all this process happening, how is halal handled or regulated? How it comes or it materializes as halal as we know today, yeah? One of the answers is the rise of technocratic governance. So authority is exercised through technical expertise, quantified procedures, and standardized audits, because audit is a big thing now in industry. Okay, you have to have certain certifications before you are qualified. And in this system, laboratories, testing techniques, traceability systems do not only validate purity, but also frame it as measurable and certifiable attribute. Okay, you can imagine, yeah, religion which is unquantifiable. You cannot measure religion, but then in this system, you have to apply those classifications and calculation, everything, and such, yeah, to a religious product, which is halal. And this, of course, comes with a lot of implications, yeah? Later we can discuss that in question and sessions. And this dependence on technical infrastructures converts halal from a predominantly theological classification into a bureaucratically implemented one, into bureaucracy. Next. So how halalizations are responded? And of course, the responses vary, in the world. So in Malaysia, halalization is seen as a tool to Islamize the state and construct Malay identity. So Malaysian government is one of the pioneers in advancing this halalization, because they have agenda to construct an ideal Malay identity and to differentiate themselves from the Chinese. So Malays and Chinese others are quite in conflict culturally, and this idea of halalization is made as a tool to enforce the ideal Malay identity. So if you are Malays, you have to consume only halal food, only halal items. In Indonesia, halalization is shaped by state religion dynamics, seen as an economic opportunity to advance the development agenda. So in Indonesia, the state is happy about halal certification because, can you guess? Okay, can you guess why Indonesia is happy with halal certification? I mean, it has strong, positive perception toward halal certification. Can you think of why? Yes? Why Indonesia is happy with halal certification? Is it because the majority of Indonesians are Muslims? Okay, that is one possible answer. Any other? Money. Definitely, yes, money, of course. Yeah. So in the past, we have actually haram certification. Okay, maybe some of you do not know this. In the past, we have haram certification. So all products containing pork must be labeled mengandung babi. Okay, that's in the past. But then this kind of certification is not acceptable, is perceived as insufficient. Because what? The number of haram products are much less than halal products. It doesn't create any money, income at all, right? I mean, no money. So with halal certification, more products are halal and more applications coming in, and it means a positive incentive for the government or for the institution that manage halal. Yeah. In China, as you know, China is a very what do you say? What do you say about China? Okay, it's huge, but it is state controlled, right? State controlled, and then there is only certain expressions of is allowed. So the emergence of halal pants, halal bath, they're not happy with that. Why? Because it threatens the Chinese identity. Okay, if they are halal, blah, 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 it may create frictions. So they banned any expressions of halal. In contrary, which is also very interesting, China is one of the biggest producers of halal products. So it's quite a paradox, right? They ban any expression of halal in the country, but they produce halal for exports for other people. So again, it's about money, but domestically, they do not want that. Okay, that's for other people, not for us. In Europe, responses vary. In some countries, like Sweden, Sweden is quite anti-Muslim, yeah. So there are concerns that halal products of halalization or any forms of religious expressions is like Chinese expressing threatening their identity. Next. Okay, so we come to our concluding points for today. So halalization is not only about expansion, but also efforts of purification and also hybridization. It blends religion, science, technology, and commerce. And it reflects a shift from faith-based observance into technocratic management of purity. And of course, it raises questions about authority. Who is authorized to define halal? And also about ethics. Okay, if this certain practice is called halal, how about other practices? Yeah, and also about subjectivity from Muslims are shaped through consumption. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to proceed to the question and answer if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Very insightful, Dr. Arum. Okay, now I invite the questions or response from all the audiences, the global citizens that, okay, come on. Oh, Pak Gandhi, yes, please. You are still young, part of the global citizen, still. Yes, please, Pak Gandhi. Mas Gandhi kalau begitu ya. Kak Gandhi.
Saya pakai bahasa Indonesia saja ya.
Ya, silakan Pak.
Terima kasih Bu Arum atas penjelasannya tentang halal yang sangat banyak memberikan insightful wawasan dan banyak hal yang sebelumnya tidak saya ketahui tentang halal. Saya bisa ketahui dari presentasi ini. Sebenarnya ini pertanyaannya Mbak Mur. Pertanyaan Mbak Mur dimintakan saya untuk tanya. Nah, kalau halal yang dipresentasikan ini terkait dengan makanan ya, atau hal-hal yang terkait dengan konsumsi yang kita masukkan ke dalam tubuh kita, dan tidak hanya makanan tapi dari prosesnya juga. Nah, kalau yang dikonsumsi oleh mata kita, misalnya film, itu bagaimana? Itu pertanyaannya. Kelihatannya itu saja. Terima kasih.
Saya jawab ya. Baik, terima kasih. Saya jawab dengan bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Indonesia? Bahasa Indonesia ya. Nah, itu pertanyaan yang sangat menarik, sangat bagus. Karena sesuai dengan yang saya sampaikan tadi bahwa halalisasi itu masih sangat saat ini ya globally itu memberikan perhatian kepada aspek material, ya, aspek material, dari aspek materi saja. Apakah bahan itu terkontaminasi oleh babi atau alkohol, itu saja. Jadi aspek-aspek seperti ethical, aspek-aspek seperti moral itu sama sekali belum tersentuh oleh sertifikasi halal. Belum sama sekali. Jadi misalnya ada sekarang kan banyak ya restoran yang bersertifikat halal, ya kan? Anda mungkin semua sudah paham ya, banyak melihat ya restoran ini halal, bla bla bla. Yang ditanyakan dalam sertifikasi tersebut, kenapa dia mesti mendapatkan itu? Karena dia melalui proses sertifikasi secara materi. Jadi kalau misalnya restoran itu ya mempekerjakan atau misalnya abuse ya, abuse employee-nya, pegawainya disiksa misalnya, menyiksa pegawainya, dia tidak masuk dalam pertanyaan sertifikasi halal. Padahal apakah itu halal? Is that halal? Abusing your employees? No, it's not. but it's not included in the current halal certification system. So that is an excellent question that should be thought about by the current management, current regulation of halal. Gitu. Apakah sudah? Ya, terima kasih.
Yes, next question. Yes.
Excuse me, thank you for the presentation. It's quite insightful for us to understand about the halalization. I want to ask a simple question. I wonder how the halal regulations are managed in the Western countries. As you said before, that the some questions in Europe, right? So I wonder how halal regulations are managed in the Western countries. Is the participate in managing the halal? I think that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's also a very nice question, very good question. In different countries, halal certification is regulated differently, of course. In Europe, in many parts of Europe, a halal certification system is managed by a third party. So it's a private arrangement, like a Muslim organization. Okay, just like in Australia, just like in also in the US, in Europe. In those countries, halal certification is managed by a Muslim organizations. Okay, so they issue halal certification and companies are applying halal certification to these Muslim organizations. Like maybe in Indonesia is equal to Muhammadiyah or NU, yeah, those kind of Muslim organizations issue halal certification in Europe, in the US, in Australia. And in some countries like Malaysia, of course, Malaysia, halal certification is handled entirely by the state. Malaysia. Singapore, also handled by the state, interestingly. In Indonesia, it's recently handled by the state. Previously, it was handled by MUI, yeah, the MUI. Through its LP POM. But now LP POM serves as just a halal audit, not issuing halal certification anymore. Okay, so I hope it answers your question.
Yes, next, please. Oh, okay, 1, 2. Okay, who's going first? Ladies first.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Devita. I'm one of the students at Japanese Studies. Okay, my question is, what do you think about cancellation of halalization in some non-Muslim countries because fears of Islamization? Thank you. Cancellation of halalization in non-Muslim countries in the world because of fears of Islamization.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, cancellation of halalization. Yeah, that's nice. Maybe you use the word cancellation from cancel culture, yeah? It's like cancel culture when some artists are canceled because of a scandal, yeah? Cancellation of halalization. As far as I know, the country that has done that is China. China, yeah? So as you know that in China, there are areas that are Muslim, that has Muslim majority places, yeah? In China, in China, what area is that? In Xinjiang? Xinjiang, is that? Xinjiang, yeah, Xinjiang. It has Muslim. So with the popularity of halalization, shops in Xinjiang at that time, yeah, before cancellation, they opened like halal bath, halal soaps, halal any shops, yeah. So it's the shops sell specialty halal products, but then after it gained quite many interest from the Muslim community in that area, the Chinese government didn't like it, okay, because the Muslim expression is getting stronger and it threatened the Chinese values. So they canceled that. No more halal shops. Okay, you have to close down everything, and it's tracked. I mean, it's being tracked down. The owners of the halal that still opens. Okay, that's cancelled. One of the example of cancellation of halalization. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I know him. His name is Alex.
Thank you, Bu Arum. My name is Alex from the Faculty of Humanities. This is very interesting on how halal has turned into a capital in this global world. I'm very interested in how the procedure on the creation of this halalization has turned out. Is there during the creation of this halalization, the quantification, the procedures, the guidelines, does this creation also entail philological sensibility or sensitivity also towards Islamic foundational texts, in which halal is actually derived from those texts? So during this materialism of halalization, is there also a growing sense, a growing awareness of this Islamic foundational texts, especially in the Western countries?
That is a very good question, Mas Alex. So as I informed in my presentation, that the current halal certification drew a lot from a certain book, which is Halal Food Production by Chaudhry. Okay, it has become the major reference for halal certification institutions in formulating standards. Okay, so halal should be here. It should be slaughtered in a certain way. Doesn't include certain elements. Blah blah blah. But then, unfortunately, with the growing halal, yeah, the growing awareness of halal, there is very few or limited attention on Islamic texts. It seems like they just accept what is being offered. Because first, I think the Western world are not aware of the complexity of Islam itself. Islam is very rich, right? It has various teachings, rich traditions, but then it is reduced into a book, which of course just take some parts or partially from Islamic teachings. And these Western worlds were not aware of that, I believe, because there is no critique so far of that book. There is no alternatives to use, but why don't we use like these other books to refer or to talk about halal? So that's what happened. Okay, thank you, Mas Alex.
Okay, we still have a bit time. I invite more question. No more? Are you sure? Oh, see? Okay, I think she's the one that raised her hand first, then continue with you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. So I would like to ask, in the context of the global halal market's rapid expansion, how do the intersecting dynamics of religiosity, consumerism, and neoliberal globalization shape the halal certification process and standards, and what are the implications of these dynamics and the governance and the regulations of halal markets across diverse socio-cultural and political economics context?
Thank you very much. That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, about religiosity, this is also very interesting because in my other parts of my research, I talk a lot about religiosity in relation to halal consumption. So some findings of my research about halal consumption, religiosity is negotiated. Okay, so like some people consume halal does not mean that he or she is highly religious, because sometimes it's just preference. Sometimes it's just because humans are quite ambivalent, right? Sometimes we feel so religious, sometimes we feel not. So like religiosity is highly nuanced in halal consumption, and regarding how it intersects with other parts, I believe I cannot give you the answer all at once now, but if you want, you could read my research. Yeah, you can find all your questions there, because like it's 100 pages, and you can find all the intersections of those diverse dynamics regarding commerce, regarding the society as well. Okay, but that is a good question. Thank you very much.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Lila. I'm from Japanese language and literature. And the question is, analyze the paradox in China's response to halalization, where the state bans the domestic expression of expanded halal products like halal pants or bags due to threat to national identity, yet remains a major exporter or certified halal goods. What does this reveal about the interplay between state power, market logic, and religious governance? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. That's a very sexy question. State power in halalization in China, I'm talking about China, okay, is quite central. So state logics is operated quite differently. So like state logic regarding the Chinese identity, or social cultural expression of its people, it belongs to state logic. I mean, I'm talking about pragmatically, yeah. It's quite different in how they perceive the market logic. They understand that halal is a very profitable, and they don't want to let go of this market opportunity. So state logic and market logic goes in different path. Okay. Let's keep producing halal food for the markets to boost our exports, to boost our economy. But then the state logic in terms of identity of its people, I mean, social cultural identity of Chineseness, is going on a different direction too. So it's quite the opposite, I think. But still, I think it's also, this kind of separation of logic is not unique to China, I think, because in Brazil, if you know, is the biggest exporter of halal chicken. Biggest in the world, halal chicken, the biggest exporter. And you know, Brazil is the land of Christianity. Yeah, Brazil, do you know the symbol of Brazil? Apa itu namanya, yang patung apa itu? What statue was that in Brazil? It's Catholics, right? Yeah, right. It's the land of Christianity, but it becomes the biggest export of halal chickens. The chickens you find in your supermarket might be imported from Brazil. You never know. Because sometimes those products are repackaged and rebranded. You never know that you consume Brazilian chicken. You never know. Okay. That's it, Mbak Lilaya.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, do we still have time? Oh, waktu habis. Oh, one more? Okay, one more.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Konaita. I'm from Cultural Studies student. My question is, the emerge of halal certification in this modern era, does it still maintain society sensitivity in detecting halal things in their environment? Because looking at Indonesia itself, I think there are still those who don't check the halal logo, and perhaps that awareness only start to emerge when they travel to country where the majority of the population is non-Muslim. And I think it's also masyarakat yang belum modern itu kadang kan juga nggak terlalu aware dengan hal ini. Terus adanya dengan halalisasi ini, apakah itu tetap mempertahankan sensitivitas tersebut? Gitu. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much for the question. That is very interesting too. Knowing or not knowing whether some products are halal and to decide whether to consume or to decide whether it is halal is entirely individual decision, right? So for example, if in this modern era, if you say modern, you don't know much about halal and you still believe that although I don't conform with the current understanding of halal in the market, and I still believe that the food I consume is halal, then you're not wrong. I mean, it's not wrong at all to do that because, like, say for example, you are invited. Okay, we live in Indonesia, and you are invited by a non-Muslim friends to eat in that place. Okay, if you are highly sensitive about halal, you may question your host. Excuse me, is the food is halal? So do you understand the implication here? So it's like advancing concerns on material purity, but forgetting all about manners, ethics of coming to people's house. You are invited to someone's house. And I mean, you are questioning the food. Okay, I mean, so an ethical is in social ethics, yeah. Is it, I mean, considered as acceptable, like manner-wise? So things like that. So I would say that if you ask about sensitivity, then it so depends on the context you are in. Yeah. Okay, I hope that somehow answers your question.
Okay. That's really the last question. Okay? Yes. Okay, everyone. Should I make conclusion in Bahasa Indonesia or still in English? In English. Or both? No way. Okay, so actually our today discussion is really remind us, yeah, that reimagining global future actually is really not merely an academic exercise. It is really an ethical and also cultural project. Yeah. From Prof. Rick, for example, reflection, we learned that the globalization that in his presentation, he made that into a specific issue on global citizen. Actually, this is not a fixed or completed process. Yeah, it continues to evolve, inviting us to rethink our conceptual framework and to recognize new forms of interconnection emerging across regions and histories. And then meanwhile, Dr. Arum, exploration of the global halal market, illustrated how globalization can also be driven by moral economies. Yeah. And biovalues and ethics that travel, adapt, and redefine what is global itself. Her insights reveal that the making of a global market is simultaneously a making of meaning and morality, if I can say. Yeah. So taken together, both perspectives challenge us to see that the global future will not be saved by power alone, but by the continuous negotiation. Once again, the underlining of negotiation between power, culture, and moral imagination. And perhaps our collective task as a scholars, practitioners, here also the emerging scholars, students are emerging scholars, if I can say, is to ensure that these futures are not only more connected, but also more just and human. So thank you all for being part of this conversation. And with that, I conclude our session. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Give a huge applause to our speakers and moderator.
We would like to say a bunch of thank you to the moderator and also our speakers today.
We hope all of the discussion we've had can be a very good insight for all of us.
Now, before we close today's event, with honor, I would like to invite Ma'am Dewi Meirashawati SSMAM Hum PhD as the third Vice Dean of Faculty of Humanities to come forward and give the token of appreciation to the speaker.
So then, we also invite Ma'am Arum Budiastu SSMCS PhD to come forward for the appreciation.
I'm very proud of her because she just graduated for the doctoral program.
Okay. Thank you for this. Thank you, Ma'am Arum and Ma'am Dewi. You all may go back to your seat.
Okay, now for all the audiences, please prepare your mobile phone to get the certificate token. Okay, it seems like everyone has scanned the barcode, so
The appreciation ceremony was the closing of our event this afternoon.
thank you for all the participants today.
See you on the next agenda.
Was-
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke teman-teman, dikarenakan acara seminar internasional sudah berakhir, maka teman-teman dipersilahkan untuk keluar melalui pintu dan akan diberikan konsumsi dari panitia. Dan juga jangan lupa untuk membawa sampahnya agar tidak meninggalkan sampah di ruang ini. Terima kasih.